Shabbat Shalom, everyone online, everyone here. Thank you for joining us for our in-depth study today. I know I'm not Ralphie and don't pretend to be, but I'm going to do my best to dig into the book of John here. We're in chapter 19. Ralphie left off last week at the end of chapter 18. By the way, hi, Ralphie, Perry, and John at the property. Everyone here says hello. So we're in John 19, and we're going to look at a few things that I found was interesting. So let's start with verse 1. And it says, "And Pilate then took Yeshua and scourged him." It's interesting that as I looked into this scourging, this flogging, it says beatings were a regular punishment themselves, but flogging and scourging in much more severe forms. So you've got the beatings, that's one level. Then you've got the scourging and the flogging go to another level. So if they say, hey, we're going to beat you today, you knew, well, it's not going to be quite as bad. I'm glad he didn't say we're going to scourge you or flog you, because you knew that was going to be pretty bad. Those were accompanied death sentences. On other occasions, governors had persons scourged as a warning, although they did not regard them as genuine threats, or even handed over Roman soldiers for execution if needed to preserve public order. So in the provinces, soldiers normally perform the beatings, like we see in Yeshua's, they talk about the Roman soldiers took him out and they did the actual beating, of the scourging and the flogging. The condemned person would be stripped naked, or let's say near naked, down to the very, very undergarment. Then fastened to a post for the beating. Jewish law allowed only 39 lashes. You can find that in Deuteronomy 25. With a calf leather whip. Roman law allowed scourging till the soldier grew tired. Now, that's pretty amazing. How long would it take someone to get tired just whipping somebody? So, you knew, okay, if this guy looks pretty fit, I might be here a while. If he looks like he's not too fit, maybe I can get by with a short beating. So in Roman law, it depended on how healthy the guy that was executing the beatings were. So Romans beat free citizens with rods, soldiers with sticks, but slaves, and probably despised non-Romans, with whips, whose leather thongs enclosed sharp pieces of metal or bone. People sometimes died during these beatings. So the idea was, with the pieces of metal or the bone, it's tearing out flesh. As it hits, it's like a claw of an animal, hits, grabs, tears, pulls, rips, whereas just a pole or a rod or just the leather by itself is just leaving severe marks on the skin. So much, much worse. All right. Then it says, this is where it gets interesting because, I'll get into it after I read the verse. It says in verse 2, "And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and put a purple robe on him." So this twisted, before I read what I had put here, if you remember a week or two ago during the main study, I had put a word up there, a Hebrew word that was called tor, T-O-R. And it was, the definition of it was a circle or a plate, P-L-A-I-T, not P-L-A-T-E. Well, I wasn't sure what a plate was, so I asked Ward, and Ward informed me that a plate was something that is twisted and kind of like a braid, where you got several things coming together in a braid. Now, if we looked at that tree, the trunk of that tree is the plate. It branches out at the trees, and it branches out at the roots. And that central part is the plate, the twisted part of everything coming together. Well, he could tell you how many things in nature are like that. It made God's signature in a plate. I just found it as I read this, I found it amazing that on the King of Kings' head was a twisted circle, a Tor. The Tor was on the Torah's head. I was like, wow, that's just crazy stuff. And but it's just everything is for a purpose in there. We just have to find it, mine it out, and discover it. So this twisted crown was not by accident. It was all for a reason. Everything done for a reason. So soldiers frequently played games such as throwing knuckle bones, coins, dice, but they could view as more unusual, hence interesting opportunity to abuse a prisoner, a practice not unknown in the world even today. Games of mockery were common, including the game of king. Thought this was interesting. Adorning a prisoner as a king and beating him occurred on other occasions, even when the person was not claiming kingship. Common coarse-treated mimes seems to have often included mock kings arrayed in mock splendor, and the Jewish ruler Agrippa I was ridiculed in this manner in Alexandria. So this was a common thing for the Romans to do. Now, here they have someone who is claiming, well, everyone's saying he is claiming to be king, so much so that this is what they put on the plaque above his head. And so, here's a person that's, even a person that doesn't have kingship, to tell them, look, here, you were putting this robe on you, you were king, and now you're going to be beaten, and now you're going to be hung on the cross, and you're going to be executed. It's just total shame, embarrassment, making them look so horrible. But this is how sick people are. So you think the world's sick today? They were sick back then too. People are people. It doesn't matter what millennia or what century you're in. People are people, and they're going to play sick games. How many of you were either mocked or bullied in school, or saw people get mocked or bullied? It happens, doesn't it? It happens.
What amazes me is God's love, that he didn't open his mouth to, he endured.
Yeah.
Endured. That's more than just, getting a little pinch or something like that. The pain he must have suffered.
I've had to do that when I'm getting raked over the coals, to be silent. It is a tough thing to do. It is hard to be silent. Your flesh wants to tell you, if you don't say something against these false accusations, everyone's going to think it's true. But I found out that's not exactly the case. It doesn't always work out that way. Another hand up. Yeah.
It's like that saying, silence is golden.
Yes. Yep. So that's what took place there. Let's take another look here at verse 2. The soldiers plaited a crown of thorns. Plaited a crown of thorns. So even in this commentary I looked at, they realized that this twisted is this word plaited or plaited, and he put it on his head in mockery of a regal crown, and they put it on him a purple robe. In mockery of the imperial purple first, stripping him of his own outer garment. Sorry, let's see if this brings it back. No, that doesn't bring it back. Come to here. One second. I can get this back up on the screen. There we go. Hopefully this will take. It says it did. And let's see if it takes it up here. Okay. Sorry, I didn't change it. I didn't change it on either one. You guys got to, did I? Oh, here we go. Okay. All right, so it says that they stripped him of his outer garment, The robe may have been the gorgeous one in which Herod arrayed and sent him back to Pilate. You can find that in Luke 23:11. And they put a reed into his right hand, Matthew 27:29, in mockery of a regal scepter. So they put this kingship robe on, they've put the scepter in his hand, and they're playing these games with him. Mind games is what you would call. Playing these mind games with the prisoner and having a blast with it, laughing, slapping. So this wasn't just, something that we thought all along. This was very detailed, very purposeful, and it had a lot of implications to it. And they bowed the knee before him. Matthew 27:29 says, and they twisted together a crown of thorns, and they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand, and they knelt down before him and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews. We have a hand up right here.
It was bad enough that the crown, the robe, but then they stripped him of his outer garment, his clothes, to expose his body.
Yeah.
And the modesty.
Right. Stripped of all things. Yep. Very interesting thing. So, another hand right here.
I was thinking about this last Shabbat, that you're born naked, and then when you die, you're stripped of your clothing. And Jesus was stripped of his clothing. And I don't know, it's just kind of ironic that you're born naked and you die naked.
Yep. Come into this world with nothing, go out with nothing. Although he went out with everything. So let's go to the next slide. And the soldiers twisted together a crown. So now we're going to focus in on the word crown on this verse. The Greek vassal princes could wear a wreath of gilded leaves, the crown of thorns, perhaps from the branches of the thorny acanthus shrub, or from the date palm. The latter would have looked more realistic. May have been meant to turn mainly outward, mimicking the wreaths of Hellenistic kings, rather than plainly inward. Nevertheless, one could not have prevented some thorns from scraping inward, drawing blood from Yeshua's scalp. Only the highest king would wear an actual crown, a diadem with white wool instead of a wreath. So they are portraying him as a vassal prince. More mockery, more mind games being played upon him. And then, going further into this verse, is the purple robe. The Greek princes typically wore a purple chlamys, purple dye being the most expensive. The soldiers may have used here a faded scarlet lictor's robe. Now, this is the first time I've been able to actually prove that there could have been scarlet here in this whole crucifixion scene, because you've heard me say many times that whenever they were cleansing the leper, they used scarlet, cedar, and hyssop, okay? When the red heifer is burned, same three elements. So I'd always proposed, since he had the hyssop up there, when the soldier dipped the hyssop in the vinegar and reached up to give him a drink, so here's the hyssop. I always wanted to see, where's the robe? Is it, because I always see this purple. But here they're saying it very well could have been a scarlet robe, now bringing in one of those elements into this cleansing. Because remember, what did he do? He sanctified us with his blood, just like the red heifer does. We've been sanctified from the filthiness and the uncleanliness of sin and death, which defiles. Cleansed and sanctified from it by this blood. Those are three elements, cedar being in one of the things on the cross, probably would have brought this to the whole purpose here. So very interesting. All right. Let's go to verse 5. Yeshua then came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to him, "Behold the man." This picture here is the Echohomo arch the arch built by the Emperor Hadrian in AD 135. It is located in the Via Dolorosa and is identified by tradition as the site where Pilate presented Messiah to the crowd, saying, "Behold a man." So let's take a look. I found this interesting as I dug what he really meant by "behold a man." So seeing a person beaten sometimes satisfied the accusers. The garb of a mock king, as in this case of the Alexandrian dressed up to ridicule Agrippa, portrays Yeshua to the mob not as a true king, but as a harmless fool. Irony and sarcasm were common in ancient sources. Some suggest that the title man may contrast ironically with their charge, Son of God, which I don't agree with because this word, Son of God, well, I'll leave that for another time. Or it may be a mock royal acclamation, as in, "Here's your king." Contrast the opening acclamation of the gospel at 129. In another irony, now here's what I like, it may be relevant to Pilate's "behold a man" recalls the opening words identifying Israel's first king in 1 Samuel 9:17. I find that very interesting. Another thing that it talked about, and it may be in, no, it's not in this next piece I have. I read to where the "behold the man" could have meant, okay, I'm supposed to, according to Roman law and according to your law, I'm supposed to beat him to near death. Behold, he's standing here before you at near death. His flesh is ripped open. He's been beaten to where, not just with a rod or anything else where it's just, in the skin, but we've used the bone and the metal things in it, and he's been torn to pieces. Here, look, is this going to satisfy you? Behold, look at him. Now are you happy? And it could be that that's the answer of what this "behold a man" meant, is, will you now be satisfied? Can I, let's release him and let's move on. But the crowd was not satisfied. They didn't want just the beating. They wanted him dead. And of course, we knew he had to die, as he told the disciples. So when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out saying, "No, no, crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." This word "crucify" is this word sta'aru, and it's to drive or to stake, drive down stakes. It can mean to fortify with driven stakes to a palisade or a place. It could mean to crucify properly, metaphorically, to crucify the flesh, where we see the New Testament uses this metaphorically, "I've now crucified the flesh" through Messiah, meaning destroy its power, which we need to remind ourselves of that when we're looking at the letters. Sometimes when we see these things he's saying, he has a meaning in his head behind what he's saying. So this crucified the flesh through Messiah is destroy the power of what's in the flesh, sin and death. So he's now saying, I've destroyed, crucified the power of sin and death in my flesh through the death of Messiah, because he destroyed that in his death and resurrection. Yes?
Would they have the power to go back and actually crucify them themselves, or did they have to take it to someplace else? They took it somewhere else, but could they have actually just taken him then and crucified him?
Well, I think the thing is they knew that he was innocent, and they did not want the innocent blood on their hands, so they thought. They're wanting the Romans to do it. They want him dead, but they know they haven't been able to find a real charge against him. And so, but they don't want this on themselves. They want it be on them. But it's interesting. What did the people say? May his blood be upon our hands. That was a real heavy statement. And so it was. Yeah. The whole, they now owned it by making that statement. I mean, they wanted death. It was like hungry, ravenous wolves. So they had been stirred up by the religious system of the day. Okay, let's look at this word cross for a minute. Stauros. When we say those words, we state the very focal point of history. The Tanakh points to it, the New Testament presents it, and the Christian proclaims it. It is the cross that is our salvation. A study of the cross as used in the crucifixion is a sobering exercise. We learn much even by a brief look. Crucifixion was, without question, the cruelest, the most disgraceful, barbaric, and excruciating execution. And you're gonna see how this word excruciating comes from crucifixion. It was the most worst ever devised by a depraved mind. It was probably invented by the Persians, who used it because it would not defile the ground, which they consecrated to their god Ormuzd. Alexander the Great introduced it to Egypt and Carthage, and the Romans seem to have picked it up from the Carthaginians and perfected it. It was reserved for slaves, foreigners, revolutionaries, and the vilest of criminals. So you see what they're declaring Messiah as, the most vilest of criminals by putting him here. We want him there because we want the world to know he's the vilest of criminals. We want him to take that punishment. While practices varied in specific cultures, archaeology indicates that the Romans preferred the low tau cross. Unlike the traditional shape, this cross looked like the capital T with the upright post called the stipes and the crossbar called the patibulum. And this patibulum alone, which our Messiah was forced to carry in his already greatly weakened state, weighed from 75 to 100 pounds. So you're carrying around a 7,500-pound pole in the state you're in. I mean, all your flesh has been ripped. You may have even torn muscles. The muscles may not even be working right. And yet you've got to do this with muscle and flesh torn, ripped. I mean, ask a bodybuilder if they can do a bench press with a torn muscle. They'll tell you no. And yet muscles have been torn by the beating and the flogging, and he's expected to carry it or walk. Tough stuff. At the crucifixion site, the stipes were secured while the victim was thrown to the ground with his arms outstretched along this patibulum. While some cultures tied the victim, the Romans preferred to use nails. Tapered iron spikes approximately 5 to 7 inches long and about 3/8 of an inch in diameter. So we're not talking a nail, we're talking a bigger round piece of steel, okay? Yeah. History further confirms that the spikes were driven not through the palms of the hands, which would not support the man's weight, but through the wrists. There's another explanation of this in another writing. Causing unimaginable pain as the large median nerve was crushed or severed. So the nerve going through the wrist would be either pinched severely or severed with the nail. The patibulum was then lifted into the stipes, and the feet were then nailed to it through the heels. So the nail would go from the front through the heel. Yeah, pretty rough stuff. And so this caused the knees to bend and rotate to one side as the man's weight hung on his wrists. The most fiendish aspect of all this was that the man's weight locked the intercostal muscles in the state of exhalation and paralyzed the pectoral muscles so he could not lift himself up to breathe. This brought on hypercardia, spasms, and asphyxia. It is indeed significant that our English word excruciating comes from the Latin excruatus, out of the cross. That and much more is what our Messiah endured for each and every one of us. Imagine not being able to breathe. You want to take a breath. They talk about this coronavirus, not being able to breathe. Here's your flesh is tore. You've got unimaginable wounds on your flesh. You're bleeding from the head. You've probably been beaten with fists in your face. And you've now had the nerves severed. The nerves severed here. Yeah, your hair has been pulled out. The nerves severed in your hands. A nail driven through the front of your foot, through your heel. And now you're unable to breathe on top of it all. What a terrible thing. A hand went up over here. Hold on 1 second. We got to get the microphone.
When you are going to start an IV on someone, the last part of the body that you want to do is this one because it is so painful. People.
Ooh. So they knew where to put it, where it would bring the most pain. Yeah. Yes, Joe.
And on top of all this other, when they put the cross up and dropped the cross into the whole jar.
Yeah.
All this.
Can you imagine everything bouncing on those the wrists there? That had to have been very, very painful. Let's look at 1 Peter 2:5. You also, as living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house for a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Messiah Yeshua. So I'm pretty sure that I looked at it that this word you is not an individual you or a singular you. This you is a plural you, meaning you all are being built up as a house, because the house isn't one stone, is it? The house is all stones put together. So the word you couldn't be an individual. I'm going to make you one stone into a big house. No, I'm going to take many stones, and all of these stones are going to become the spiritual house. So acceptable to God through Messiah Yahushua. Let's look at Hebrews 10:19. Therefore, brethren, since we have confidence to enter the holy place by the blood of Yahushua. Now, when I read this, because it's all talking about Messiah's sacrifice, which is what we're in John 19. This word, enter the holy place, everybody has interpreted this to mean he entered that they can enter that place where the most holy place, over here where this gold thing is. But even though that's not the holy place, where the ark is, that's not the holy place. Even though people thought, oh, that's the veil that's torn, we can now go into where the ark is. That's not true. That's completely misunderstanding what they're saying in Hebrews. You don't have the right to go into where the ark of the covenant is. That's not what he's referring to here. At the very most, he's referring to the place where the lampstand is and the showbread is. But I think he's referring to this whole courtyard here. You're able to come in here. Why am I saying that? Just when Rico was here a couple of weeks ago, he pointed out that only people that were in covenant relationship with him were able to come into this courtyard here. Only people in covenant relationship. Now think about it. Like Gary says, one of the things that Yeshua did at his death was nullify the divorce so the 10 northern kingdom tribes could come back in. They now have entrance to this place that they never had entrance ability before. So he's telling them, you guys can now, why is that important to them? Because now you can bring an offering. You never could bring an offering before, but now through the blood of the Lamb, you can now enter this holy place and you can bring an offering again to the Most High. Physically, they can come to the temple and bring an offering. Now spiritually, we can do that as well. We can offer, as Hosea says, our lips substitute for the bulls. Our lips, our hands spread out towards heaven, are as the evening and the morning offering. So either way, we're able to come into the place and present our offering to God, whether it's from our lips or in their day, because the temple was standing, they were able to do it then. We now have entrance to bring the offering to God. Yes. That's right. Yep. So, then he goes on to say, by a new and living way, which he inaugurated for us through the veil, that is his flesh, and since we have a great high priest over the house of Elohim, let us draw near. What does draw near mean? What does draw near mean? It comes from the word korban. What's korban? It's an offering, a sacrifice. Let us now draw near. He's using this term to let them know, yes, you can come with your korban offering and draw near to God, because that's how they drew near to God. Let me change this back. This would be interesting if we have this go on all the way through the next service. On this? All right. Let's see if that works. Okay. I thought I did. It says Living Messiah iMac. AirPlay unable to connect to Living Messiah's iMac. Okay. Yeah. As I was thinking about this, if my, every, in this day, in the first century, every Jew, every Israelite, let me say Israelite, every Israelite, whether they were the northern kingdom or the southern kingdom, they wanted to be able to present their offering to their God. He asked them for it. He wanted them to do that, and they wanted to do that. So you're one of the northern 10 tribes, and you haven't been able to do that for 700 years. You've been exiled, and you haven't been able. You couldn't. You've been kicked out. You weren't even allowed to come into that area. And now they're telling you you can now come to the holy place, and you can present your offering and draw near to God with your korban. That makes sense to me. That's the message he's telling us here. You're now able to draw near. He has set you free from sin and death and all of the things that come with it. And now you can come now to your Elohim. We all have that right now through the blood of the Lamb, that ability. He's granted us access that we didn't have before. What an amazing thing. To think that the creator of heaven and earth died that we might be able to have access to him. That's amazing. Yeah. What an amazing thought. Put your glasses right here. You think that did it? Oh. Not yet, huh? Let's see. So we were talking earlier about the braided plate, okay? And you'll have to ask those of you that are interested in that. I don't know if you were here when we were talking about the braided plate. So whenever they twisted the thorns and made a crown to put on his head, I found out that a week or so ago, or maybe it was last week, that this word Tor means a circle and a plate, Plait. And so Ward was telling me that this word plate means something that's been braided or twisted. So many strands brought to a single strand. Well, when they did that to the crown, they created a circle plate on his head, which is all throughout nature. In other words, they were putting like a signature, his signature on his head. The one who created all of those things, like the tree, many branches coming to a single and then branching out to many roots. But in the center, it came to a single strand. If you look at a river, it comes from many sources to one, and before it dumps in the ocean, it branches out again a lot of times to a big, wide branch into many sources. So it's interesting that that's everywhere, and that's what goes on his head.
It's interesting to note that at this point where they put a crown, he given us our crown so we can lay it to his feet, and that's the righteous crown that he wants to receive.
Yeah, amen. Okay, so let us draw near with assurance, having our hearts sprinkled clean. Where does that language come from? Sprinkling clean is what they did with the ashes of the red heifer. They would sprinkle those ashes on the one who's going to be cleansed from defilement of death so that they're clean from that death. Well, all throughout the New Testament, they proclaimed what Yeshua delivered us from was sin and death, the two things that defile a person. So we've been washed pure by the blood of the Lamb. Okay. Get this one on, right? Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the tabernacle was God's dwelling place, God with us. Ezekiel 37:26. I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant with them, and I will place them and multiply them, and will set my sanctuary in their midst. Just for a few hundred years. No, forever. My dwelling place also will be with them, and I will be their God. They will be my people, and the nations will know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies Israel. There's that sanctification when my sanctuary is in their midst forever. John 1:14 says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory as the only begotten from the Father, full of grace, full of truth. So what this is in the Tanakh, the tabernacle was God's dwelling place. But how do we see God dwelling with us in today and the future sense? That's why I put these scriptures on here. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us outside of the tabernacle setting. That was the way that he dwelt among them then. The tabernacle was in their presence. He dwelt among them. But now that the tabernacle is not there, is he with us? Yes, he is. He's with us. And we saw his glory, glory as the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. And Revelation says, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is now coming again among men, and he will dwell among them. And they shall be his people, and God himself will be among them. But wait a minute. Why is the tabernacle coming back? I thought all that stuff is done away with. You know, that stuff's old stuff. That stuff's the Old Testament, right? We don't need that stuff. Why is the tabernacle coming back? Why would we need a tabernacle? Interesting stuff. Matthew 28:18 says, and Yeshua came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I command you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of, and here's an interesting phrase, even to the end of the age. What in the world is an age? I talked about this a few times because I got to know stuff. I can't just go, some kind of an age, whatever that is. I want to know what it is. And so if you do your research, you look it up, the age is the time it takes the sun to, let's say the sun goes clockwise through the year. There's 12 numbers, there's 12 constellations, and the sun is in one of those numbers each month, right? But if you look at that sun on the day of the equinox, March 17th, and you were able to live 1,000 years long, you would see that it moves backwards from number 12 to number 11 to number 10. It goes backwards over only on that day. You got to look at it only on that day. And it's in a different place. It appears to move backwards in the scope of time. That's called an age. The age is how long it takes the sun to move through that constellation in what's called the equinoxes, the motion of the equinoxes. So Let me draw that real close to you. How many of you know what constellation the sun is in right now on the day of the equinox? Any of you know what constellation is going to go to here soon? You would know it by a song called Age of Aquarius. Okay, so the sun is soon to move into this Aquarius sign, which is the man holding 2 vials of water, pouring them out on the earth. And what the heavens are telling you is when that happens, there's going to be a pouring out of wrath, there's going to be a pouring out of blessing. 2 different types, depending on your relationship with him. It's in the heavens. He created it, letting you know that you're soon here about to transition into that age. But we're still in this other one that is coming to a close. And Yeshua said, I am with you to the end of the age. Well, each age is this constellation time. So we've been in the constellation of Pisces for the last 2,000 years, the 2 fish. And what did Yeshua tell them to do? He said, go hunt. I want you to be fishermen. So they're hunting for the 2 fish, the tribes of Israel. Go to the nations and hunt for the fish. I'm going to make you fishermen of men. And so the fishermen had been fishing for the men for 2,000 years to where now God has gathered those fish. The word and the gospel, the message of salvation has gone out literally to all nations, to all tongues. And now we're coming to a close of that time. And so we're about to now transition out of this age. And my belief is as we're coming out of this age, he says, I may be with you because when this age ends, the Messiah comes to reign here on this earth. So I would propose to you that God's times, we have these hours, minutes, days, weeks, years, months. He's got epochs of time that are beyond our time. For example, there's millennials. There's 1,000-year, epochs. Just like the 7,000 years at the end of 6, that 7th is the reign of the king, right? We come into the Shabbat, the 7th, right? So I would propose to you that there's some even greater than that we can't even fathom. No. I'm saying this. So, right. Well, so when Messiah was crucified, they had just entered into Pisces. The sun had just entered into Pisces. And it takes 2,000 years for the sun to go across that, observing it on the equinox. If you had a star program, you could watch it. It would just move each year going from 33 AD all the way to now. It's traversed going the other direction. Certainly it's going this way yearly, but what man can't see is the other course of time unless you live long enough to watch it, which now because of the programs we can see it. But don't you know Adam saw it? Don't you know those men that lived 800-900 years, don't you know they saw it? They saw this amazing timepiece that God had put in the heavens, and they realized what was going on. And the story it tells is phenomenal. I didn't want to get too long into that, but we're leaving the hunting of the fish. The hunting of the fish is coming to a close, and guess what the good news is? The pouring out is coming next. The fish have been gathered, and now I'm going to pour the blessing, and also the curse for those that were not being obedient. So many things to look forward to. All right, a couple other scriptures here for you before we close. Only got 2 minutes. In the Tanakh, the curtain stood for the barrier separating people from a magnificent and holy Elohim, God's majesty. Psalm 29:3. The voice of Yahweh is upon the waters. The God of glory thunders. Yahweh is over many waters. The voice of Yahweh is powerful. The voice of Yahweh is majestic. Yes.
I just want to point out that the braided circle, when you take that braid, instead of pulling it tight to make a tight circle, if you expand that braid out, you get a net.
So so when the braid is spread out, it forms a net, which is For fishing, yeah. Isn't that awesome? That's pretty cool. Yeah. He said that braid, that twisted braid that we talked about, the plait, right? So a plait is many strands of like hair being brought together into a braid. That oneness of all the hairs is a plait, Plait. And so that's in nature, like the trunk. All of those branches come to one, and the roots come to one. So, yeah, so all the strands of hair go to one, and then at the end, it usually flares out into a bunch, right? So he's saying that whenever you, in a plait, usually whenever you unfold it, if you held one end of the hair and the other is attached to the head, and you pulled it, what would happen to the center part? They would all still be connected, right? So it forms a net if you're holding on to the other end. Yeah, pretty cool. That's awesome. All right. I've not even reached the end of my study. I don't know how you feel, Ralphie. I thought I'd get through the end of this and have 10 minutes, 15 minutes left over, but all right, I want to thank everybody online for joining us. Ralphie can pick up here. We're at, I don't know, verse 7 or so. He can pick up next week with that. I hope you've enjoyed the study as I have, and may you have an awesome, blessed Shabbat. Father, we thank you for this study. We magnify and glorify you and give you praise in your Son, Yahushua's name. Amen. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.